All right, so today we're diving deep into California, and wow, things are pretty intense right now.
Yeah, no kidding. It's kind of a crazy mix of stuff happening all at once.
For sure, we've got these raging wildfires near LA on top of this water crisis that just never seems to end. To make things even more interesting, we have this brand new executive order from Trump about water rights that's already causing a ton of controversy.
Wow, yeah, that's gonna be a big one to unpack for sure.
Let's kick things off with the most immediate situation. The Hughes Fire, this thing just exploded north of LA literally today.
Just this morning, yeah.
And it's already burned through over 8,000 acres.
It's spreading so fast.
It's like, what, 12 and a half square miles? I mean, try to picture a firestorm the size of Manhattan.
It's massive, and it's happening under a red flag warning. So, these conditions are just primed for explosive growth.
Right, so we're talking like high winds and super dry vegetation, like just add a spark and whoosh.
Exactly, a recipe for disaster. And they've already issued mandatory evacuations. Over 19,000 people have been forced from their homes.
Wow, 19,000. That's incredible. And these evacuations are happening in areas like Castaic Lake and north of Lake Piru. I mean, can you imagine just having to grab whatever you can and flee?
Oh, it's got to be terrifying, especially not knowing if you'll even have a home to go back to.
I can't even imagine. And, this fire, it's not just affecting the people who are being evacuated. It's putting a huge strain on resources. And, we still have the Eaton and Palisades fires burning too.
Right. Every new fire just adds to the pressure and stretches those firefighting resources even thinner.
Totally. And it's not just the fires themselves. We have to think about the air quality for the entire region, the strain on emergency services, and all the disruption to daily life for so many people even miles away.
Absolutely. It's a chain reaction that impacts so many different aspects of life. And then there's the long-term stuff, the rebuilding, the ecological damage, the economic hit to communities. It's a lot to deal with.
It really is. And, it's kind of a reminder that California is constantly battling these wildfires. But the scale and speed of this one is definitely alarming.
Oh, for sure. Even for a state that's used to fire seasons, this one is a bit of a wake-up call.
Definitely. All right, well, let's shift gears now and talk about a different kind of battle that's heating up in California, the fight over water.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
So we all know California's been dealing with this drought for years now. But just today, Trump issued a new executive order that aims to redirect water to Central Valley farmers.
Yeah, this is basically round two of a similar fight that happened during his first term.
Right, and this new order is reigniting the debate over who gets priority when it comes to California's limited water resources.
Exactly. You've got farmers who are struggling to keep their crops alive, then you've got growing cities with thirsty populations, and then you've got these fragile ecosystems that need a certain amount of water to survive. It's a tough balancing act.
All right, so let's break down this executive order.
Yeah.
It basically directs the Commerce and Interior Secretaries to make sure as much water as possible is flowing to the Central Valley.
That's the gist of it. Yeah, although there's a lot more to it than that.
Right, and I keep hearing about this controversy over something called biological opinions. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what that even means.
Okay, so basically, a biological opinion is like an environmental impact assessment, but it specifically focuses on how a water project might affect endangered species.
Oh, I see. So it looks at the potential consequences for the environment.
Exactly. And these opinions, they can actually have a huge influence on whether a water project gets approved or not.
Really? So that they're not just a formality. They can actually stop a project.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really controversial. Environmental groups see these biological opinions as essential safeguards for endangered species.
Makes sense. But I'm guessing not everyone is on board with that.
Well, yeah, some farmers and water users see these opinions as just bureaucratic roadblocks. They claim the science behind them is unreliable and the regulations are too restrictive.
So they think it's more about red tape than protecting the environment.
Pretty much. And this executive order, it seems like it's trying to sidestep some of those environmental concerns to get more water to the Central Valley, at least in the short term.
It's interesting because you've got voices on both sides of the issue that feel very strongly about this, right?
Oh, definitely. You've got people like Congressman Fong and Congressman Valadao. They're both strongly in favor of the executive order. They say it's a lifeline for their constituents in the Central Valley.
Right. Their argument is that the Central Valley needs this water to survive.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you've got environmental groups warning about the potential consequences for ecosystems further north.
Right. They're concerned that diverting more water to the Central Valley will harm the environment in other parts of the state.
Exactly. And it really does feel like a zero-sum game. Like if you help one side, you automatically hurt the other.
It's tough because there are valid points on both sides, and it's not an easy problem to solve.
It really isn't. It's one of those situations where you have to weigh the costs and benefits and try to find a solution that works for as many people as possible.
It's a tough situation for sure, and it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Absolutely. This is one to keep our eye on for sure.
All right, so we've got wildfires raging near LA and a major fight brewing over water resources in California. And these two things might seem completely separate, but they're actually connected in some pretty surprising ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're both symptoms of a much bigger problem that California is facing, and that's climate change.
It's like this crazy feedback loop, right? The hotter, drier conditions fueled by climate change are making these massive wildfires more likely.
Exactly, and those same conditions are contributing to the ongoing drought that's draining California's water resources.
It's like everything is feeding into everything else, and it's making the problem even worse.
You got it. The hotter it gets, the more water evaporates, the drier the vegetation gets, and boom, the more susceptible the land becomes to these huge wildfires. And then you factor in all the choices we've made about land management, water usage, and development, and it just creates this incredibly complex web of problems.
So it's not just about putting out the fires or finding more water. It's about tackling these underlying causes, these systemic problems that are at the root of all this.
Absolutely. We need to be thinking long term, and that means shifting from just reacting to crises to being proactive and planning for the future.
I like that, being proactive instead of reactive, but I have to admit, it feels a little overwhelming. Like, where do you even start with a problem this big?
Well, there's no magic bullet, but there are definitely things we can do to make California more resilient to these challenges. We can start by asking ourselves some tough questions, like how can we manage our forests better to reduce wildfire risk, and how can we be more efficient with our water usage and find new sources of water? These are the questions we should be asking ourselves constantly, not just when we're in the middle of a crisis.
I agree. We need to be having those conversations and taking action now before it's too late. But it's hard, right? Because it requires a big shift in thinking and a willingness to invest in long-term solutions.
It does, but I think we're starting to see a growing awareness of how urgent this is. And more people are realizing that we all have a role to play in creating a more sustainable future for California.
Yeah, it's definitely not just the responsibility of scientists or policymakers. It's up to all of us to demand action from our leaders and to make changes in our own lives.
We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix this. We all need to step up and be part of the solution.
And the crazy thing is what's happening in California right now, it's like a preview of what's coming for many other parts of the world as climate change gets worse.
Absolutely. The lessons we learn and the solutions we develop here, they could have a huge impact on other places that are facing similar challenges.
So we need to get this right, not just for California, but for the whole world.
That's exactly right.